Hi guys, I just wanted to share with you all what I felt that there's a little thing that remind me about myself. When I was on the train today, I decided to take out my earphones and then just look around, and then I saw a parent and a kid. The kid was about 5 years old, and the kid was very adorable, looked smart and all. He was a sharp kid, but the thing was, when the parent was saying that what station was this, the kid couldn't pronounce it because the mom said what station is the next station after this. So the kid was like looking at it and he couldn't pronounce. He's just a 5-year-old kid, but the parents were so frustrated that he couldn't pronounce it. Then the parent keep on yelling at the boy, saying that pronounce it. But the boy just couldn't pronounce the word because he was mumbling and jumbling, and then he got frustrated, and then he kind of like got quiet, and then he kind of like started to have a very sad face. Yeah, and that remind me of myself when I was growing up as a kid. um I could never understand what on earth that was written on the blackboard in school. That's because everything that I look at, all the alphabets, the numbers, and words will just fly around, and they will never come out into words. As a kid, I would never understand why I couldn't study, because I would spend my time trying to understand. I would read books, and then I would get so frustrated that I can't really understand what am I reading, because it always turns out the other way around. Sometimes I would think that I'm reading this, but actually I'm not reading this. And then sometimes my parents will ask me about places, and I will pronounce the place like upside down, like the words will flip around. So growing up in school was very bad because in our school days we would tend to write whatever is written on the blackboard. Like our teachers would just write on the wall, and then we would just copy that. I realized that when I copy, I have no idea what on earth did I just write. So that's how I grew up, not understanding education. And it was very bad because I thought I wasn't able to even understand basics basic education, and just normal class things like history, science, math. It was all bad because I could not understand what was the teacher trying to explain. So during those time, I'll be in school just writing and drawing because I couldn't study. And when I go back home, I get zeros and E's and fails for every subject that I go to. My parents were just like, okay, maybe you shouldn't be studying, or maybe you should do some other stuff. So sometimes things like that just makes me feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be studying, and maybe I should go towards another direction, maybe art, because I always felt like I'm better at art because I could remember a drawing and then I can redraw it, and I'm very good at colors, and I can always remember where things are being placed, and the shapes and numbers and places. But I could never understand alphabets. It's like, how do I spell apple? I'll go like PPAL, bell, bell. I'll get lost, and I realized that I couldn't understand the words is because they were constantly flipping around inside my head, and twisting around, and I could never understand what on earth am I trying to read. So I would, instead of trying to understand and trying to figure it out, I decided to make characters out of words. It's like, when there's an A, B, and C, there's a shape that goes up and down. I remember that, and that's how I remember how to read. So that's a way for me to understand how I understand alphabets and words. And I never knew that there was something wrong with me, because I felt like I'm just lazy. I couldn't study, so I decided to not study that much and then focus on drawing and doing some other stuff. But in the true fact, when I got older, I realized that there's actually people who are suffering from this. It's a very simple thing, that the way every human beings are being wired in their brain. Some people are wired in a way where they understand things by looking at objects, and then some people understand things by reading and trying to understand. For me, I realized that I'm dyslexic. So that's why I could never understand whatever I read, because it's alphabets that does not make any meaning to me. So in that way, I realized that it's because I was dyslexic. I couldn't read and I couldn't understand by just taking a book and reading it. I went for another way. Instead of reading, I went for lecture classes and I tried to understand what is the theory, what is the concepts of things and art and locations and history by listening with my ears, with my eyes, and through objects that I see and touch. So that's another way of learning, and that's how we actually grow from being a dyslexic child. So in the society today, I realized that some people are not meant to be taught that way. It's like if you force a bird to swim, it can't swim. It will just drown. But it can swim, but it will not be good at swimming. It's not his job to be swimming, because his job is to fly. And same goes for if example, if I give you like 3 animals, a dolphin, a cheetah, and a bird. If you force a cheetah to swim, he will swim. He will try his best to swim, but that's not his best ability. His best ability is on land, and he'll be able to run as fast as he can. That's his ability. And then the dolphin is able to swim, but you can't ask the dolphin to climb a tree. It will never work. So same goes for the bird. You can't ask a bird to run on the floor, because it's meant to fly. So I realized the education system in our society needs to understand that there's different methods in teaching children nowadays. Because back then in our days, nobody understands what are dyslexic, what are children who are underdeveloped. I'm sure that there are very intelligent kids out there in this world that just require the proper education. Because I was lucky that I managed to figure out that there's another way to study. Else, most likely I'll be just end up in some shopping mall sweeping a floor or something, because I would always think that I'm not good enough to study. I will never understand how the society works. But instead, I realized that there's other ways to learn, to develop, and then grow, other than reading. I listen, I watch, I hear, and I touch. So these are ways where helps you to develop. So today, when I saw this parent yelling at the child louder and louder and louder, it doesn't make the child get smarter. It does, because they think that the kid is just lazy. He doesn't understand. I had this feeling that the kid just couldn't put the words together. It's just how I feel that parents should actually take the time to try to understand how kids are. Because if the kid can't pronounce a word, it doesn't mean that he's stupid or his ability is not good enough to survive in the society. Or don't just put him into a box and say that that's it, you are just good for nothing. Maybe you are just gonna be a second class worker that has nothing much to offer but to just use your hand and work. No, I don't think so. Everybody has a talent, especially people where you try to figure out what is their capability and then what is their skill. I believe that everyone has a special ability in themselves. Even though if you are very good at just a small little thing, but that small little thing can mean a very big importance to the right place. So I'm just here to share with you all how a dyslexic mind works when people think that it's like, oh, how does a dyslexic actually work? Well, I can slightly explain to you guys how a dyslexic works. Is like I'm able to see a room. I'll be able to figure out where the bed is, where the chair is, where the table is, where the window, everything, all that, the color, the shading, I remember that. But don't ask me the name of an actor, or how do I spell the name of an actor. I will have to use spelling check, because until today I still find it very hard for me. But as I grow older, I tend to start to remember. It took me almost 30 years to remember how to remember my identification number. That was so hard for me, because I constantly couldn't remember it until I figured out that because there's an the alphabet has a shape, so I use that shape to remember the number and then the shape. So that's how I remember things. So I realized that by using shapes and colors and numbers, that actually helps people with dyslexia on how to understand and remember things. So if you're reading, most likely, if you have a reading disability and then you figure out that you, after you spend days and days of trying to understand and study, and then it doesn't go into your mind, that means you are studying the wrong way. That means there's something wrong with how you absorb information. So maybe there's another way to do something, maybe from another way. Maybe instead of running, you can swim, you can jump, you can fly. There's so much ways for you to figure out how to develop your sponge in society. So I'm just here to share with you guys like a little bit of how it feels like to be to be a grown up dyslexic person that still struggles today because I can't remember how to spell names and alphabets, and I'm not good at calculations. But the funny thing is, I'm working in an architecture firm and I'm constantly calculating, and I'm doing formulas, and I'm checking building codes. But how I remember all this is through numbers. No, it's not even through numbers. I'm using colors. I'm using color text, file names, and shapes. That helps me a lot when people ask me about things about how building codes. I remember the file is supposed to be in blue, and then blue means represents building, and then that's how I find the file, and then what year, and yeah, that's how I work. For everybody, there's a different way of working, so I'm just here to share with you guys a little bit of dyslexia. So I hope I managed to let you all know how it's like to be in this position for some kids out there. So if, for you all who like are young parents and you notice little things like this in your kids who are growing up, and then they lack like the ability to understand, it doesn't mean that they're useless or they're hopeless. It just means that maybe the way they absorb information is different. So give them a chance to grow and try to figure out what's the best method to teach them. If reading is not good enough, try singing or maybe watching a TV. Sometimes watching a TV actually helps, because that's how I learn about science and history, all through National Geographic and Animal Planet and travel channels. That's how I know about how I know about I know about things that happens in the world by watching news. But nowadays news is so complicated, so I just select the things that I want to hear and I want to know, then I'll just go in and figure it out. So I hope I managed to help you guys try to understand a bit more. Over and out.